Hi, I'm Paul Elam with An Ear for Men. Today my talk is on high conflict relationships. In the book I co-authored, Say Goodbye to Crazy, there's a lot of discussion of personality disorders and to a lesser extent family of origin issues as they relate to dealing with high conflict individuals. It is recommended reading, especially if you're dealing with someone who is personality disordered or if your family of origin issues drive you to be attracted to high conflict people. What is not covered in the book to any useful degree is what I estimate to be the much greater source of relationship conflict than personality disorders or family dysfunction. Be forewarned, in order to discuss this, I will be making critiques of women as a class and men as a class. The critiques, however, are not intended to be construed as condemnations. I am simply talking about long-standing human characteristics that have become a bad fit in the modern schema. The tendency I'm referring to specifically here is gynocentrism, and you will find it is a part of the root structure of most relationship conflicts. Viewing this through an anthropological lens, gynocentrism is simple. In order for the human species to survive, it required males to protect and provide for women so that they, in turn, could co-produce and ensure the survival of children. Those men who could provide and protect the best were favored by women for sexual reproduction. In short, it required male disposability. It wasn't fair or unfair, it was just survival. The longer we survived, the more natural selection produced men who were skilled at protecting and providing for women. It worked fabulously and charted the course for a human existence that is now no longer dependent on a set of survival rules 3 million years old. This is where our modern problems with the connection between men and women begin. In a world that does not require gynocentrism for survival, it more resembles a psychopathology than a constructive instinct. We can see that now in several generations of women whose expectations of men has grown increasingly irrational and destructive. Just as we have several generations of men who obsequiously tend to those decidedly unhealthy expectations. What used to be the male's mandate to provide immediate protection, food, and shelter, enabling women to care for children, has now mutated into a mandate to provide more lavish material goods, the satisfaction of whims, and, to be quite frank, obedience. The term, "when mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy," was not pulled from thin air. As gynocentrism dictates, women are used to getting their way and men are used to surrendering to that. We are also quite adept at not noticing this when it is in front of our eyes. Recently, Kalani Ruiz, a student journalist at San Francisco State University, wrote an op-ed in that school's official newspaper asserting the idea that the term man cave is now sexist and harmful to women. Of course, no sane person would take that seriously enough to even be offended by it. However, Catherine Tempf, a reporter for the National Review, did a smartly funny takedown of the idea. What was more interesting, though, was that neither Ruiz or Tempf understood that the actual sexism in the term man cave is against men. The reason that man caves exist is because the rest of the home is typically the domain of the woman. The house and everything in it is actually hers. And if he is lucky, he gets to carve out a space where things can actually be about him. A man cave is an artifact of gynocentrism, something Ruiz and the slightly more aware Tempf are both equally blind to. Even in the supposedly gender role obliterating world of modern feminism, he for she and the thinly veiled gynocentrism of male allies remains the ultimate agenda. One might imagine that this would result in less conflict between men and women. After all, if it is the human condition for men to give and women to take, then it would seem to create some sort of balance, would it not? Well, actually, no. First, there is more distrust and animus between men and women now than ever. We have a growing number of men going their own way, a marriage strike that is gaining steam, a burgeoning date off-campus movement, belligerent feminism, and other macro divisions between the sexes. This is also reflected in our individual relationship lives, with divorce and broken families being the norm. So far, we have struggled ineptly to explain the social breakdown that has resulted. A favorite and logical target is establishment feminism. However, not all these problems can be explained away so conveniently. A deeper understanding is needed, and it can be found in the force that fuels feminism, traditionalism, patriarchy, and every other mode of thinking we incorrectly imagine to be different. That fuel is gynocentrism. My body, my choice, and women and children first are just the bifurcation of the human gynocentric drive. Let me put it this way. When sacrifice is needed for survival, no conflict results. It would be like fighting over ruining a blanket when putting out a house fire. However, when sacrifice only means more sacrifice, and when diamonds, pampering, and control become life necessities, the naturally resulting resentment will find its way into the relationship. That can take many forms, but take form it will. Some men rebel and become hostile to the gynocentrism, even if they never heard the word. They may think in terms of her being a selfish bitch and imagine that her conduct is the result of poor character or immaturity. They might think she has some sort of personality disorder, and sometimes that's true. Her actions are easy to interpret in that manner. What is agitating those men in most cases, though, is the unending and unjust burden of gynocentrism. Other men unconsciously turn the frustration inward. We may see that expressed as suicide, depression, alcoholism, violence, and other emotional maladies. For these men, ignorance of gynocentrism is particularly dangerous. These are men who can outwardly appear happy, even elated to hover around the desires of their partner, proud to place their own needs perpetually on the back burner. They are so completely saturated in the gynocentric mindset that they take pride in a life of self-denial. Mental health deplores imbalance. Many of them won't keep that up forever without becoming self-destructive. Some might say, okay then, I'm going MGTOW, problem solved. Well, not so fast. MGTOW is a reasonable and rational response in many ways to gynocentrism. At the very least, it takes many men out of the line of fire, especially in the savagely gynocentric environment of our family courts. The problem with that, however, is that human beings are a pair-bonding species. All public and personal politics aside, that is an indisputable fact. The matrix is not political, it's biological. Most human beings will seek the familial comforts of love, connection, and belonging. There will be some exceptions. Some of our greatest inventors and innovators were confirmed lifelong bachelors, likely due to their obsession with pioneering new ideas. And another group that can do without the trappings of home and hearth are sociopaths. Almost all of us, however, will pursue loving relationships in one way or another. You can learn more about the science behind this in a 2013 article by Peter Wright that I have linked in the low bar. So the question becomes, how, in the worst of times between men and women, does a man approach this very vulnerable area of his life? The answer, I suspect, is in that which routinely gets tossed out by so many men when dealing with women: values. Men will wax endlessly about a love of truth and justice and then defend the most despicable and treacherous of women simply because they are female. Men will say that they value fairness, then surrender to every demand a woman makes, no matter how ridiculous or petty. Men will work 8, 10, or 12 hours a day and then come home and listen patiently to a jobless female partner whine about how deficient they are. Men will tolerate being physically, emotionally, psychologically, and sexually abused and take pride in the fact that they did not defend themselves. All of this, every last bit of it, is rooted in gynocentrism and the abandonment of values in men that gynocentrism demands. This is so unnecessary. It is true that with a few exceptions, all men and women are gynocentric. Men did not cause that, but they are the only ones with the power to do anything about it. Gynocentrism varies in intensity from person to person. You can measure it in women by how averse they are to your values. That would be actual values, not the ones some men claim to have until a woman enters the room. Deeply gynocentric women abhor values in men because men with solid values, self-respect being among them, cannot and will not cater to a child in a woman's body. This also explains why deeply gynocentric men are so bereft of anything resembling values. With the exception of putting women first, they generally have no values at all. Pro tip here: deeply gynocentric men make horrible friends. They will throw you under a convoy of buses the moment they think it advantages them with a female or anywhere else for that matter. The fear that drives that man to be an untrustworthy step-and-fetch for women is part of the gynocentric mentality we all share. It is the fear that if we doggedly hang on to our sense of justice and fairness, that if we remain grounded and focused on our own issues, that we will suffer a life of loneliness. That fear, like gynocentrism in modern times, is an irrational, baseless destroyer of human potential and of love. Steadfast adherence to your values will just attract a different, better kind of woman than you will ever find while wearing shining armor. It does not mean that you will be free of struggles or conflict. If you engage in any relationship, you will have your share of both. If, however, you maintain your self-respect, if you are willing to issue a no when it is appropriate, and you enter a relationship with that on the table, gynocentrism won't take over your life. You can free yourself from it as much as humans are capable of doing that. And you might find that in living your values, you discover that gynocentrism is the only obstacle to sanity in a relationship you ever had. Well, that's it for this visit. Thank you for taking the time to listen. As always, if you want to support the work I'm doing here, please consider visiting my Patreon page and making a pledge. Thanks again, and see you next time.